Hey, Alpha Fam. Welcome back to another episode of Alpha Commission. Today on Alpha Commission, I just want to review that massive scam wick that we had on Binance US back here in October, where basically it predicted the entire path that the market would likely to drop to. And I'm just wondering, just hypothetically, could Binance US have had anything to do with the manipulation of this market? And of course, by Binance US, I mean Binance Global, and of course, their CEO, CZ. Now, guys, I think this really hasn't been addressed enough because, of course, at the time that this scam wick occurred, we didn't really know that this was the top of the market. We had some type of concept that we were getting perhaps, breaking through the top of the previous high, but the bullishness that immediately followed made us all, consider that there is the possibility for a continuation, maybe even to 100 or $120,000. Many people believed that the pie top indications were just wrong because it indicated that this would have been the top of the market back here in April, the prior spring. But of course, we continued to make an all-time high. Every day we were making like a new all-time high. And so this scam wick quickly just faded from the the collective consciousness of the crypto world. But it's quite interesting, isn't it? It topped out at $67,000 and it bottomed out at $8,200. Now, this is interesting for two reasons. First, we know this industry is highly manipulated, highly manipulated, and that Binance, in particular, has played pretty interesting games with Tether and others in the market to serve their own purposes without accusing them of anything. We'll just say that, they're one of the older exchanges with people highly experienced from back in the days when crypto was basically a black market, right? And so it's just interesting that, if they were running some kind of test and accidentally flipped the switch on, to live when it wasn't supposed to be ready yet, then it's interesting that their wick topped out at literally the top of the market within $2,000 and that it's projecting the bottom literally within $2,000 of my projections, right? So I believe that there could be a range of 7,500 to perhaps $14,000, but I'm leaning closer to that $11,000 range, so 11,000 to that 7,000 range. And Binance US, their scam wick on Bitcoin is pretty much right between those two areas, right? And so this is quite interesting. And I just think that we shouldn't dismiss this, especially since we all know that there were some very strange occurrences happening in the leadership of Binance US back in the day when this was happening. It wasn't that long ago that we were all talking about how Catherine Coley, the former Binance US CEO, had suddenly gone missing. Now, why was she either fired or why, did she suddenly disappear? That's not clear. Nobody reported her missing, and there have been some insiders who claimed that they've seen her around at certain industry events. But if you look at her Twitter, there's literally nothing going on. There's no update. There's nothing. She hasn't posted since since retweeting something April 19th, 2021. And what do we know happened around that time of April 19th, 2021? We had a top of the market. Okay. And by the way, Binance US also had another CEO, right, by the name of Brian Brooks. And Brian Brooks also ended up mysteriously quitting, right? Binance US CEO Brian Brooks suddenly resigns after only 4 months. So first we have, Catherine Coley disappearing. Then we have her suddenly and quietly replaced by Brian Brooks, who then quits after only 4 months. And when did he quit? It was approximately 1 week prior to the collapse of Bitcoin that summer. And guys, this is very, very suspicious, right? So Catherine Coley goes disappearing around the top of the market when Binance is basically dominating this market. Then their replacement CEO quits a week before the collapse of Bitcoin that same spring. And then somehow somebody inside of Binance US, not Binance, but maybe a little bit of a sloppier operations over at Binance US, where CZ and the Binance team doesn't have quite the same stranglehold on all the operations. Somebody seems to have triggered some type of algorithm that gave an indication of the top of the market and possibly also the bottom of the market. And while they tried to pass this off as nothing, as just a big nothing burger, what we could see is that almost immediately we reached the height of that candle, and that ever since then we have been retracing the entire length down. The height of that candle to its bottom, which aligns almost perfectly with our projections of where the market could end up in that high support area that Bitcoin has. And what would that suggest? That would suggest that Bitcoin has another 60% to drop, okay? 57%, 60%. Guys, does that number sound familiar? I have been talking about the super cycle on stocks and how that could actually end up, resulting in a 60% drop on Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and go over to some of these charts that I have here where I've mapped out the super cycle. And if we were just to take a projection of where I'm considering that it could bottom out at, you were looking at perhaps a 28% drop to the bottom of this range. So, what's 28% times 2? Since Bitcoin has a factor of 2 compared to the NASDAQ, that's about 56%, right? So that would be almost that 60%, right, that we would expect to see. Look, it's a 29, something like this, right? So it's almost that 60%. If we go to the S&P, right, where does the S&P bottom out on my projections here? Well, for the S&P, we have, let's see if I have a good range here. Yep. The S&P Bitcoin acts approximately 3 times the S&P, and the S&P could be as far as 30% down. But of course, this is just a loose interpretation. So I also have these other perhaps zones over here, which we could be looking at, which would suggest 20% down. You guys know how I came up with these numbers on past episodes. And that 20% obviously times 3, that ratio of 3 that Bitcoin has to the S&P 500 would put us around 60% down on Bitcoin. And of course, I strongly believe that Bitcoin most highly correlates with the NASDAQ 100, that kind of tech-heavy selection of the NASDAQ, because Bitcoin kind of trades like a tech meme stock. And so if we just take the NAS 100 and just at face value, then we really are talking about that 28 to 30% down, which again is in line with that 60%. And that 60% just happens to correlate perfectly to that Binance US scam wick that appears to have been built into their algorithm early on, and some employee accidentally turned on the Bitcoin kill switch a little bit too early and revealed their hand. So there's that 57%, and perhaps we could dip a little bit further down, as low as 5,500, maybe for 70%. Maybe some really good news could happen, or we stop as low as a 25% down further, which something really great would have to happen in the market, or maybe we just go sideways for a while, which would lift the bottom of the market because these prices do tend to be on diagonals, right? And of course, my favorite idea is that we would probably get around here, around the 886, which would be that 40%. But you guys know I've been talking about the possibility for lower than that quite for many episodes. And so I really strongly consider that 7,500 to 14,000 is the range that we're looking at. And look, it looks like it's been pre-programmed by Binance US. And this guy, Brian Brooks, who was the CEO of Binance US for only 4 months, he seems to have quit for ethical reasons. And he seems to be advising the US government and meeting with the US government many times. Recently on his LinkedIn, he mentions that just 1 week ago, he says, exclusive. I spoke with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Commissioner Hester Pierce on Friday to get a sense of how the regulator is approaching crypto. And so, it's just interesting that these guys are actually looking, to talk with, regulators regarding these issues that are kind of emerging. And I'm not sure if there's anything really to this, but it's something perhaps worth thinking about. And if there are regulators out there who are looking into crypto, they might want to explore what happened at Binance US and perhaps talk to their latest CEO to find out what's going on. And of course, CZ, the Binance CEO, Binance Global CEO, he is a heavily the majority share owner over at Binance US, to my understanding. And so whatever is going on at Binance US, it looks like it's very sloppy. They can't get their people together. They're not 100% on board with whatever Binance's policies may be, because they're losing executives left and right. And also, they're revealing their hand to the market. So, guys, I don't want to get too conspiratorial or anything. This is a heavily manipulated industry. Just keep that number in mind, like 8,200. Let's just see if it pops up again. Shall we? Just keep an open mind to see if that number pops up again. Maybe Binance US showed us where the bottom of the market will be. And if it is, I hope US regulators and other global regulators are listening because something needs to be done about that if it's true. If it's true, because a lot of people lost a lot of wealth. And if there are just basically relationships or buttons that can be pushed, which basically determine the future of these assets, right? And if there is that kind of scheme in play, that kind of Luna, take it or lose it kind of setup, then it's just something that this industry needs to clean up. So watch out for that number, 8,200. Let's see. Let's see how far we go down. All right. That was your alpha for the day. Stay safe and happy trading.